Okay, so let's put the lining into our jacket now. Find the center back of your lining and find the center back of your neckline facing. Here it is, the notch. I'm going to mark it with a pen so you can see it. Here's the center back of my lining, and we're going to match those two up. Okay, put right sides together. And then start pinning. So once you've pinned your center backs together, you'll just pin out in both directions, to the left and then to the right, and just pin matching up your shoulder seams and your any other notches that you have on there. And you may have some ease in some places, and that's fine, as long as it's not too much. Now when pinning your lining together, you don't want to pin all the way down to the hem of the lining, of the jacket and lining. Okay, so leave about 4 inches free from the bottom. Okay, because you're going to have to fold your lining up eventually, and you don't want to stitch so far down that you're not able to fold up your lining to the inside. Okay, so just keep that in mind. When I pin this together here, I left about 4 inches free from the bottom. Alright, so once you're pinned, go ahead and start stitching it together. You can just start on one side. Remember, leave about 4 inches free from the bottom, maybe a little bit more, and start on one side and stitch all the way around to the other. Okay, once you're done stitching it on, go ahead and turn it right side out and just check and make sure it's sewed on correctly and nothing's pulling or pleated or folded. Your armholes are lining up okay. Maybe that looks good. Alright, so now we're going to do the vent opening. So the first thing we need to do is remember we stay stitched on our lining, the vent that L's out, and also part of the vent that notches in. We need to press under along that stay stitching. So this is the back side of my lining now. And I'm pressing under right where I stay stitched that 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay. Now this is the side of the seam allowances that the side of the seam allowance, or sorry, the side of the lining that L's out. That is pressing. And now this is the part that the vent that notches in. I'm clipping right up in that corner. And now I'm going to press this under as well. Okay, that corner where I clipped it, that's diagonally, I clipped right up into the corner to my stay stitching. I clipped to my stay stitching, but not through it. And remember, this is the side of the lining at the vent that notches in. Okay, so I'm going to press this all under, and then that top part I'm going to press up as well. Alright, now that we finished pressing it, let's pin our lining together at the vent. We're going to pin it to the jacket. Now what we're going to do, so this is the part that L's out. We're going to line up the top part of lining with the top, our lining vent with the top part of the jacket vent. Make sure that you're not pulling at center back. You don't want to be yanking your jacket. You don't want your lining to be too tight so that it shrinks or puckers your jacket. Okay, so here I'm lining up the tops of my vents, and I'm going to pin this together. Okay, so I'm pinning the lining part that L's out with the jacket part that L's out, starting at the top. And what you want to do is bring your lining not all the way to the edge of the jacket. Leave a good 1/8 of an inch. All right, so you can see how you can see some of the fashion fabric here on the inside. Okay, you have about 1/8 of an inch. And pin all the way down. All right, but don't pin, like when you sewed your lining to your jacket, leave a good 4 or 5 inches free at the bottom, because you have to fold up your lining eventually to hem it. And now that I finished that, I'm doing the part that notches in. So the top part, I'm going to push up any seam allowance, make sure that's hidden up there. We don't want to see any seam allowance or anything hanging out, any thread. And this is coming over the top part that L's out. And what that does, it finishes over that raw edge. And gives it a nice clean finish. It takes a little bit of fiddling with sometimes. Alright, and you have stay stitching there that you can line it up with. And now I'm going to pin that on. Okay, to hold it in place. This might take a little fidgeting, but you can do it. Now I'm going to fold this part of the vent that L's out of the way, that I've pinned the top part on, and I'm going to pin my lining, the part that notches in, to the jacket vent that's folding back, okay? Just to that vent, part that's folding back. I'm lining up my seam allowances, so it's overlapping. That part of the lining that's pressed under is overlapping a 1/2 inch. And I'll pin this all the way down to the bottom, again leaving 4 to 5 inches free so that I can hem my lining up later. Alright, you can see that just finishes that nice and cleanly. Looks very nice. Make sure nothing's pulling or puckering. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to hand tack. We're going to use a hidden slip stitch, and we're going to hand tack the lining to the jacket. Alright, so I'm starting with the part of the vent that L's out. It's the first part that I pinned together. And I'm just going to do this hidden slip stitch again all the way to the bottom, leaving 4 to 5 inches of the lining hanging free from the jacket so that I can fold it up later and hem it. Okay, once you get to the bottom, go ahead and tie off. Clip your thread, and now I'm going to do the top. Alright, so remember this is the part that notches in, and it's covering up the part of the vent that L's out and finishes it, gives it a clean finish. I'm going to start there, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to slip stitch the vent closed, or the top part of this lining to the top part of that vent. And again, I'm going to use a slip stitch. I'm going to do it across that top area of the vent opening, and then I'm going to come down the vent opening as well, just like I did on the side that L's out. And we'll just slip stitch it all the way down to the hem. Again, leaving 4 to 5 inches free so that we can hem up the lining later. Alright, now we're done stitching it. Let's lay it out, make sure nothing's pulling or puckering, it looks good. Now I like to just give it a nice, quick, gentle press. Smooth out those stitches, set in my stitches. That looks very nice. You can see how a little bit, about 4 inches are free at the bottom. Okay, so now you've tacked in your vent. Alright, so now on the sleeve, those are going to be hand stitched in. So here I have one of my sleeves. Alright, and what I'm doing is I'm folding back my seam allowance along my stay stitching, and this is at the sleeve cap and arm well the sleeve, okay? I'm just folding back that seam allowance to the wrong side and pressing it. And I'm using my stay stitching as a guide. Alright, once you've done all the way around, and do that to both sleeves, and once you've gone all the way around, we can go ahead and pull it right side out, or leave it inside out, whatever you want. And we're going to now pin this to the jacket, okay? Or the lining that's in the jacket. So what I'm doing here is I'm finding my shoulder seam and I'm lining up the shoulder notch on the cap of my sleeve, and I'm bringing the part of the sleeve that I folded back or pressed back, and I'm lining that up against my stay stitching on my armhole. And now I'm at the well. I'm finding the notch at the well of my sleeve. And I'm going to line that up with my side seam. And I'm going to bring the edge of that sleeve opening to the stay stitching at my armhole. And I'll pin that together as well. Okay, and you're going to continue doing that. Now just pin the sleeve on all the way around. Okay, lining up the part that you pressed back with the stay stitching of the armhole. Now we didn't put any gathering stitches in this. You don't need any. Okay, yes, there's still ease at the top, but you can just pin it and you can kind of use your fingers to balance out that ease or even out the ease around the cap of the sleeve. And it works out very nicely actually. Okay, once it's pinned on all the way around, check it. make sure you only pin the 2 lining layers together and you didn't catch the shoulder pad or the jacket wool or anything. And if you've done that correctly, go ahead and we're going to slip stitch this on. Okay, so what you're going to do is just travel down the fold of the sleeve lining and catch the armhole lining of the jacket. Stay within your seam allowance. Don't go outside the seam allowance. And that stay stitching that you have on the jacket armhole is very useful. You can just, as you're hand stitching it, you just stay right within that. And then again, when you get around the arm cap where there's ease, as you hand stitch it, if you do it correctly and you're traveling down the crease of the sleeve lining, it just eases right in very nicely, as you can see here. Okay, so once you've made it all the way around, go ahead and tie off and clip your thread. And just check it and make sure everything's, push it right side out, or yeah, right side out. Make sure nothing's pulling or puckering. Looks good. Alright, pull your arm inside out because now we're going to attach the notch, or the sleeve, the lining sleeve vent to the jacket sleeve vent. Okay? And here I'm clipping up on the notch side of that sleeve vent, because what I have to do is press under the seam allowance. The way we do this is the exact same way we do it on the we did it on the jacket vent. Okay, it's just smaller, but nothing else is different. So if this is hard to see, you can go back and watch how we did it on the jacket. But again, I just clipped up into the corner. Okay, this is the side of the seam allowance that's notched in, and I had stay stitched all this as I talked about previously, and I'm just pressing it under. Okay, once it's all pressed under, make sure that your lining of your sleeve isn't going to tug on your sleeve and make it pucker. And now I'm going to start pinning my lining to my sleeve at the vent. Okay, again, don't bring the lining all the way to the edge of the fashion fabric, leave 1/8 of an inch. Okay, and also don't pin all the way down to the hem of the sleeve. Leave a couple inches open because, like on the jacket hem, we have to also fold up here on the sleeve hem that lining to finish it. Okay. So the side I have a pin in is the side of the vent that L's out. And this may take a little fidgeting to get right. So just keep playing with it. And then remember that part of the line that notches out, that finishes the top area and then comes down the part of the vent that folds back. So just pin it together, work with it. It should go together very nicely. And then also we're going to fold under our lining to finish the hem edge of it. Okay? So you need to decide how much to fold under, probably be around 3/4 to an inch. You want to leave about a 1/2 inch between the bottom of your sleeve and the beginning of the hem of your lining, as you can see here. Okay? Alright, that looks pretty good. Couple more pins to adjust. Make sure nothing's pulling. And now we're just going to slip stitch just like we did on the jacket, the center back vent in the jacket. We're going to slip stitch our lining to our sleeve at the vent opening. Okay, now that we finished tacking it, I'm just going to give it a quick press. Kind of set in those stitches. This helps kind of flatten anything out that's puckering a little bit or has a little bit of ease to it rather. And now we're ready to do the hem of the sleeve. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just folding back my lining and I'm just doing a catch stitch. I'm catch stitching it to the top of the sleeve facing. And you're going to do that all the way around and on both sleeves. And this is how the hem of the jacket will be finished as well. Okay, once you're done, pull it right side out. Make sure your lining, sometimes people end up shortening their lining too much, and it ends up pulling on the sleeve and creating creases and puckers, and it doesn't look nice. So just pull it right side out, put it on the form, make sure everything's hanging very nicely and that the lining isn't pulling on the jacket in any way. That looks pretty good. Now, if you don't have a vent in your jacket or your sleeve, then it's very easy. You don't have to do any of this vent work, and you'll just be hemming up your sleeve and hem as if there was no vent there, because you don't have one. There it is, finished. All right, now we just need to hem up our jacket.